Welcome back to another episode of the Sabre Roundtable. My name is Jonah, and that's all you're really going to get this week because it's just me for this time around. JP and Christian both nose deep in studying. JP, obviously, as we've previously mentioned, he's studying hard for his big CPA exam, and Christian, he's tied up in some schoolwork as well. So I figured I'd hop on here, try to talk some Sabres hockey. There's been a lot of it since the last time we've recorded. There's been a lot to talk about. Frankly, I don't even know where to really begin because it has just been a roller coaster, really, it's just been up and down with how the Sabres have been playing and how we've been reacting to this. I guess you can call it a slow start at this point. After 7 games, the Buffalo Sabres are 3-4, game under 500, seventh in the Atlantic. It's I wouldn't say it's the start that many of us imagined, or at least would hope to happen. And even then, I really don't think it's probably the first time in a while where many outlets had the Sabres consensus probably above 5th. I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone that thought they'd finish below 6th, but here we are, 7 games in, and well, it hasn't gone the way they wanted. And for those that listened to our last episode with me and Christian, our message was very much take a deep breath. It's a long season. There's so much we still don't know about this team. When we recorded that episode, they were 2 games in, and even 7 games in, it still feels like we don't know what this team is, which it makes it hard to evaluate because these up and down performances have really kind of muddied the grasp you can have on what this team is. And I think I'm not going to go into each game individually. They've played 5 games since the last time we recorded. We'd be here a while if I just went in and out of each contest that they were in, but I think a brief overview can kind of summarize the reactions and the online discourse that we've kind of been subjected to. It's a reactionary fan base. I think we all know. When it's high, it is so high, and the lows, well, we do kind of like to pile on them sometimes, and so do a lot of people. So when you're a team in a 12-year playoff drought, yeah, there's going to be some pessimistic fans. And, of course, I and JP and Christian, we try to keep it optimistic because you want to take a step back and you want to look at the big picture. And the big picture, it's fine for the Sabres. Hell, look at tonight. Yuri Kulik, Matthew Savoy, Isaac Rosen, all in one line, all collecting points for the Rochester Americans. The future is still so bright for this team. 7 games in, it's not going to dampen the optimism that I have on how this team is being rebuilt to this point. But it would be naive to step away from that and act like there weren't expectations for this season, and that honestly, Kevin Adams took a gamble by not taking a gamble. We know the offseason he had. His biggest additions were Connor Clifton and Eric Johnson. He kept the same 3 goalies. Didn't touch the offense. It's the same team. Yeah, he drafted Zach Benson. Zach Benson's on the team. That's awesome. But we know that he is sticking by his guys. Not saying he wanted to do that. Not saying his plan from the very beginning was to stick by these guys and continue to let them develop through and through. They were in on guys all summer. People like Brad Pesce or Noah Hannafin, who's seemingly going to get an extension now, and Connor Hellebuck, who got an extension. All of these guys, the Sabres were in on at one point or another. But it just didn't work out that way. As we know, it was a dead NHL offseason. It's just the way things shook out. But for the start to occur, it does look bad on Adams at points, and he's gonna bear the brunt of the blame here if things continue to spiral, I guess. I wouldn't say they're spiraling, but optimism, it's starting to go down. There was a lot of hype coming in, and the first few games kind of sunk it. They've been up and down the past week, as we know. And right now, they're just kind of in this weird spot. Like I said, we don't really know what this team is. So let's quickly recap the last 5 games and kind of take you through this, I guess, roller coaster of emotions that the Sabres have kind of laid upon us. After those first 2 rough games against the trapping New York teams, Buffalo comes in and they beat Tampa Bay in overtime. Going through this game, there were some question marks. The Sabres didn't have the most offensive generation in the world. They only put 2 past Jonas Johansson at 5-on-5. Power play, it didn't look good, but you know what? They defended the lead well, even though Tampa tied it late. The PK looked strong, and hey, they won in overtime, and Dylan Cousins got a goal, and Jeff Skinner got a goal. So hey, some of their big guns were going. You know, when that game ended, I think a lot of people were all thinking, hey, we're going to be okay. We're back on track. We're back on track. They beat Tampa. They kicked off this homestand in a positive way. Let's get rolling. Calgary comes to town, and the Sabres lay an egg. There's really no other way to put it. 4-3 was the final. I think that's kind of generous. You look at the numbers, the Sabres got boat raced at 5-on-5. Like, Calgary dominated that game through and through. They were lucky for it to be that close. It was yet another game of, okay, this team is not generating anything offensively. It was 4 straight games. And it was starting to become worrisome, where are the Sabres, like, yeah, they've improved on defense. Their defensive stats have gone up. They're around middle of the pack of the league now. Some players, as we're going to talk about, are putting up defensive results that they have not put up in their careers before. At the same time, even 7 games in, even after these next few games, some of their big guns were still kind of waiting for them to get going. And Tage got a goal in this game, but it was another night where you just kind of you didn't know you knew what the problem was. Their big guns aren't firing, and their offense kind of stinks, and that's frustrating. And it's a weird type of frustration, because that is like the last thing that you thought this team would have had problems with. Was scoring regression in order? Sure it was. They're a plus finishing team, but even last year they scored the 3rd most goals in the league. That, if a little regression came in, that would have been fine. But to not even really be generating anything, I mean, you're talking about their offensive, like, their expected goals for per 60, I'm pretty sure it was 30th in the league going into their game against the Islanders. Like, it was not good. And, you know, after this game, you saw Donnie threw the lines in a blender. He knew he had to get something going here. And, hey, next game against the Islanders, it worked. Holy cow. Return of the goat head, more of a packed house, and the Sabres put up a full 60-minute effort against the Islanders. It was a great game. Took a little goat head magic, took a little juggling of the lines. Now we're back. You know, they only got 3 in against the Islanders, but the numbers indicated like this. They were fine. This was the old Sabres. Their rush play was working, especially against a trap. I know the Islanders were on the second half of a back-to-back, but it was 3 periods of it was domination. It was that high-flying offense that we had come to know from the previous 82 games. So it was an encouraging game. It was. We thought they were back on track. And the Tampa game, bit of a red herring. This seemed like our Buffalo Sabres. They're back on track. They got to win against potential playoff wild card race opponent. All right, we're back. Let's finish this on a high note. Let's finish this homestand on a high note. And then they get goalied. Now, they got goalied by Jake Allen against the Montreal Canadiens. It was frustrating. You could feel the frustration from the players. They just couldn't get anything by him, man. But even then, like, Montreal had their looks. A lot of Buffalo's chances came on the power play. Their 5-on-5 really wasn't that. It wasn't domination. It wasn't what you wanted from a game against Montreal. But they still deserved to win. They did. Jake Allen did steal that game for Montreal. And that was it was deflating. Like deflating more than the Calgary game. More so because it was just it was at a point where you really thought that they were coming back. You thought that they were fine. They were coming off that game versus the Islanders. You figured that it would just be, they would win this game. It was one of those games that you figured they'd win. Even Calgary, it's kind of a toss-up. This one, frustrating as hell. And that kind of brought, that's when we knew this was a slow start, right? 6 games in, that's enough to say it's officially a slow start. Maybe a few more games, but 2 and 4, it's not the first few games that people had envisioned for this team. And optimism was starting to leave. You saw online people were starting to question Adams' offseason and his entire approach to this point, which you see it often. Okay, you see a lot of fans, I'm sure a lot of listeners we have, people want him to be more active. And even I want him to be more active, of course. I do. I was expecting a big summer from him. I thought he was going to make a statement. I thought he was going to come away with a big trade, but it didn't materialize. And of course, at face value, it's really easy to say, should have gotten a top 4 defenseman, or you should have gotten a goalie. But then that's easy to say as a fan. But okay, if you're the GM, okay, what's the next step? Okay, who would you have gotten? Who would you have traded for? And you can throw out names, but none of those names moved. Unless, you were one of the people that wanted the Sabres to go and get Erik Karlsson. None of the big names moved. It stinks. And sure, it is kind of a get out of jail free card from Adams to just say, oh, there was no movement this offseason. But it to a point, it's valid. If 31 other GMs aren't making moves, why do I have to be so caught up with mine? Moving forward, yeah, it's done now. Like next summer, cap's going up, the free agent class is loaded. It should be an active summer for Adams, especially now that he's kept all of the prospect capital and he's still got money left. It should be a big summer. But I can live with the summer that he finished with this year. But as I was saying, people were starting to get on Adams for this slow start and started questioning that. And yes, they were getting on the players as well. Tage Thompson only had a single goal going into the Ottawa game, right? Was that his only point? Maybe he had another. Cousins was starting to produce. Dahlin was producing, as was Skinner, but Alex Tuch was kind of quiet. Obviously, Casey Middlestat, really want to give a shout out to him. He was producing, but a lot of their guys you want more out of, and they weren't going. And then we get to the Ottawa game. A game ripped right out of last season. I mean, literally ripped right out of last season. They come out flying. They go up 3-0, let in a goal, score 2 more, including the power play finally stepping up, and they're up 5-1 going into the third. And, whoa, for 15 minutes, they look pretty good defending this lead. And then, Ottawa gets 1. And, okay, they get another. And, oh my God, they got another. Oh, this is going to be close. Oh my God, they took a penalty. Oh my God, and Tage Thompson gets the empty netter. Whew, sigh of relief there. That was a game ripped right out of last year, including UPL being the goaltender. They score 6 goals, they win 6-4. almost blow it at the end, almost give us all a heart attack, but they come out on top. And the big guns came out to play. Alex Tuck woke up. He was great. Gordie Howe hat trick. Jeff Skinner, another 2 goals. He's on pace for 46. Tage Thompson, 2 goals and an assist. It was what you had been wanting to see from them. So, with it out of the way, with kind of that brief rundown, let's try to somewhat grasp what this team is. 4 of these games, they've struggled to create offense. 3 of them, which are 3 of their last 4, they've looked good, at least on the offensive side. Last night against Ottawa, Montreal, they were the better team, and then obviously they dominated against the Islanders. So, is that going to go away? Are we going to see more of that? Are we going to see more of the high-flying team from last year? I certainly hope so. In any case, we can blame Granato for a little bit of it, if you want. If you believe that by telling these guys to be more defensively responsible, by telling Tage Thompson to not cheat the zone, by telling Dylan Cousins to not cheat the zone, maybe even Alex Tuck by telling him not to cheat the zone. I'm not even saying he does, because throughout his career he's been a good defensive player. But for example, by doing that, is he limiting these guys? Maybe. Probably somewhat. It's probably the answers in the middle between whose fault it is, between the players and the coaching staff. But it does fall on the players at a certain point, because we've seen these last few games. They can translate good defense into great offense. They can do it. We put out a tweet after the Calgary game, and it was after sleeping on it, after thinking about the game, and thinking about Eric Johnson's quote, which was that he thought they needed to come out more defensively in a game where they couldn't produce anything offensively. Sure, it was worrying, but we put out that tweet, and it said that what's probably going on here with this slow start is that this team is having to deal with expectations for the first time in this rebuild, while also having a philosophical shift in how the coach wants them to play. Because I think we all see it. Granato wants them to play more defensively responsible. Eric Johnson has been talking about it since the moment he signed here, that Colorado, while he was there, took that step towards becoming a true contender when their core players took note of the defensive side of the game. And he's right. He is right. But it was worrying that he was saying that after an offensive disappearance against Calgary. But what we said was that they're going through this shift. Either A, they're in the adjusting phase, or B, they're not cut out to play more defensively responsible. They just have to be all run and gun. And these last few games have hopefully signified that it is indeed A, that they're just trying to adjust, that it just took a little bit for their mojo to get going, for the chemistry to come back, for their big guys to start to get going, and to get used to this, I guess, new philosophy that Granato's trying to install in them. And they know. Look, Dylan Cousins' quote after the Tampa Bay game. He says they know they have to win defensive battles. They know they have to win close games because those are playoff games. And he's right. Even with scoring going up in the NHL, games obviously tighten in the playoffs. You just don't want that to come at the cost of offense. But, as I've said, they have seemed to have found the balance. And that's kind of the key here, right? It's balance. You want a team like this to lean more on the offensive side, but you do want them to be able to play good defensively. You don't want it to sway too much one way or the other. You don't want to become the Islanders, and you don't really want to be last year's Sabres. Not 100% of the time. You want to find that balance. And hopefully they found it. And the reason that it's kind of starting to emerge here that they can play that way is some guys on this team that haven't put out the defensive numbers that they're currently putting out. They haven't done that in their careers yet. That's kind of why they're doing so well. Let me put it this way, okay? The top 5 Sabres players in expected goals against per 60. This is coming from Evolving Hockey. So basically, these 5 players are preventing chances the best. They are giving up the least amount of quality. The top 5, I'll start from number 5. Number 5, JJ Peterka. Okay. Not a great defensive player last year. This year, pretty darn good. Number 4, Mattias Samuelsson. Now, that's who you want to see there, but he hasn't put up those type of numbers just yet, especially last season. And listen to this top 3. Number 3, Dylan Cousins. Number 2 is Tage Thompson. And number 1 is 18-year-old Zach Benson. Benson, it's just hilarious because he's 18 years old and he's putting up these type of defensive numbers. I mean, expected goals against per 60, 1.56. I mean, that's ridiculous. He's only played, 5 games now? Still, that's just so, that's insane. Insane. The offensive numbers, not quite there yet for him, but the defensive numbers, that's pretty eye-popping. But number 2 and 3, Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins. What were we talking about at points during the offseason, especially after Johnson signed and he said those quotes where he said those quotes about the Colorado players? He was right, and we'd hoped that Tage and Dylan, we hoped that they could improve. But it's a big jump, especially for someone like Tage Thompson, who was, if you want to be blunt about it, especially what you will see from some people claiming what private models pick up on, Tage Thompson was arguably one of the worst defensive players in the league last year. And now he's putting up the second best metrics on the Sabres. That's crazy. This guy's a unicorn. Will it hold the whole season? I don't know. I mean, he looks better defensively. This isn't like those numbers seem kind of weird. That's not what I'm seeing. Though it looks legitimate. Like, that seems right. The guy is playing fantastic at both ends of the ice. The points aren't here yet, but even his offensive numbers, he leads the Sabres in expected goals per 60. He's leading the Sabres in shot quality. He's driving the most amount of offense right now. He's playing fantastic right now. The goals are coming, seriously. And if this defense keeps up while he can do it, you're talking about he's putting himself into the upper echelon of the league. There were debates last year. You would see him kind of break that top 10 of NHL centers if all of a sudden he's like this great two-way player on top of the dynamic goal scoring. I mean, this is what Matthews did for Toronto. That's the type of player you're talking about here. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Small sample size, 7 games, but it's pretty crazy. The difference between Tage defensively last year to this year, it's astronomical. And Dylan Cousins took that big jump too. He was one of the Sabres' weaker defensive players last year, and he's putting up good results. And that's huge. If Tage and Dylan, if they give you a 1-2 punch down the middle that can kill you in both zones, that's huge, especially if it's both. If one of these guys made this defensive jump, that would be significant. If it was just Dylan Cousins, Dylan Cousins was the guy that most people were pegging because, like I said, Tage was one of the worst defensive players in the league last year. The fact that they're both doing it, that is huge for this team if it continues. So that's a great development. I hope that continues. That would be amazing. Also, I do want to point out here, second on the Sabres in expected goals per 60, Jordan Greenway. Yeah, the guy, he's playing out of his mind right now, and especially being thrown on that line with Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins. Okay. We got the defensive discussion out of the way. It's balance, balance, balance. That's kind of what we're trying to signify here. The Sabres have to try and find that. The great thing about this is you've seen those numbers that I just listed. They exist. Like, there was a point where I was maybe kind of skeptical that Donnie could transition to this type of style where he tries to limit these guys. You know, for the past 2 years that he's been head coach, he's basically been, letting these guys go, letting them off the leash, just telling them to go, do their thing, do their offensive flair. And fantastic for the development, got them far in the standings 2 consecutive years. I was skeptical that maybe he could make that switch, especially in one off season with the same cast of characters. This is the same group he had last year. Other than, I guess a healthy Jordan Greenway and 2 defensemen in Clifton and Johnson, who are currently on your third pair. So it's not a huge turnover. And I do commend Granato. I have to, that he's gotten them to play this way. But like I said, it's not, the offense has to emerge. They have to do what they did against Ottawa. They have to do what they did against the Islanders. Let's hop over to the special teams. Truly, 2 different stories going on here. Let's start with the good. The Sabres penalty kill is legitimately elite. It is good. Like, it's winning them games. Seriously. It is winning them hockey games, which is not, that is not something I expected to say coming into the season. Even after the preseason, I really wasn't impressed by it coming out of the preseason. I thought it still looked like guys didn't know what they were supposed to do. I think they got scored on a couple times. Don't quote me on that, but it felt that way. But man, it seemed like all they needed to do was to have some guys buy in. And here we are. The Sabres currently sit 7th in the NHL in penalty kill percentage with an 88.9%. That's amazing. Such a huge improvement, and it's so deserved. It's not like the goalies are carrying them through this. They are legitimately doing great on the penalty kill. And part of it, I have to give props. Jordan Greenway, who was criticized a lot, especially towards the end of last year. Obviously, he was criticized overall. He didn't look good on the penalty kill, mostly because, A, the scheme was bad, and B, he was having to learn this new scheme, which was bad. Now, they've changed the scheme, and Greenway knows it, and he looks fantastic. Him and Tage out there, it's not quite a power kill, but they're just so good at taking away lanes and being able to challenge shots because they're so big. One stride over, and they can challenge the guy on the wall. It looks great. Full props there. It was one of those things that needed to get better. It was historically bad last year. I think they finished at like 70%. So if they finish top 10 this year, that's big. Even just top 15, that would be so much improved. Now for the power play. I'll put it this way. Right now they sit 22nd in the NHL with a 13% conversion rate. And anybody who follows us on social media knows I have my qualms with the power play. It's specifically with Jeff Skinner. I love Jeff Skinner. He's awesome. He's playing on another level already to start this season. I can't watch this guy on the power play. I can't. It's not that he doesn't. I mean, he scored the other night against Montreal, right? Scores on a beautiful shot from below the goal line, but like that's almost part of the problem for me because it's not a design play. If Jeff Skinner doesn't score that goal, the Sabres have what? 2 conversions on the power play this season. Tage scored against Calgary. And I'm trying to think before that. I don't know. Like, it wasn't pretty. And yeah, they scored against Ottawa last night. They had a goal. Tuck had that goal. Great. I'm going to hold off on it now. I'm going to hold off from really going in on it. Because I've done it in the past. I think I kind of cut deep into it last episode. It didn't cost them against Ottawa. It helped them. It was, that goal by Tuck was huge. As you can see, all they had to do, move the puck around a little bit, got guys moving. Dahlian blasts one, Tuck's there for the tip. I think Marty Brown pointed it out on the broadcast. Jeff Skinner and Alex Tuck were in the middle of the ice, kind of providing a bit of a double screen. They kind of peeled off as Dahlian was taking the shot to get out of the way, but it was there. And you saw, got a stick on it, back of the net. I just want to see more of that. At the same time, I don't expect it to, because if you listen to my thoughts from last episode, that top unit has been together for so long that I don't really expect it to change much. I hope it does. But until it does, I guess I'm going to have a pessimistic attitude towards it. But I'll leave my thoughts for how I would change it, what I would do to it. I'll leave it for another time. I'm feeling good this episode. That Ottawa win deserves some more optimistic talk than to damper it down with some power play talk. Okay, let's move on to the goaltending. So it's kind of the one thing I've neglected to mention, especially when going through this past week's games. But let's start with Devin Levi. I think it's pretty clear they already reached his limit. And I don't mean like he's not going to play for the Sabres again this season. No. He started 4 consecutive games. And I think I understand what they were trying to do. I think Granato was trying to get as many bullets out of the gun as he could. And I like what they did, because they think Levi is their starter. Ride him as your starter. I wouldn't have started him for that 4th game. I would have given it to Comrie or even UPL. I think that Calgary game, it was setting him up for failure. And the guys in front of him didn't give a good performance, and he didn't give a good performance. He wasn't good that game. He made some big saves, but he wasn't good that game. And then a day later, he goes down with a day-to-day injury. Now, you couldn't have predicted that, but you were setting him up. He was fatigued. He had started the previous 3 games. It wasn't a smart call in my opinion. But overall, Levi, there's some talk about him. I don't think he's overmatched. I think I've seen enough from him these games that give him more time. And you know what? I'll say right now, I would maybe give Comrie more games. I think I would. And I hesitate to say UPL as well. This 3-goalie rotation I don't like. All 3 of us have spoken about it on this pod before. It just doesn't jive well, because 3 guys are all looking to get into a rhythm at once, and really nobody's able to. It's just tricky to work your way around. I think at the start of the season, it kind of looked like Levi was going to get, 75% of the games. Maybe that's a bit high, but like it was looking like, you start him the first 4 games of the season, it almost seemed like the organization wants him to start 60 games, which is crazy. Like, I would not, ideally you wouldn't want that. And all I'm saying is just drop the percentage a little bit. Bring him down to 60%. Give Comrie more looks. He looked good in his 2 games. He looked great against the Islanders, and he was good against the Canadiens. Yeah, you probably want that 2nd goal back, but he was good. He made saves for them. He still came out above expected in that game. I like what I've seen from him. And for anybody that's been listening, I've been standing by him, I think, since honest to God, when he shut out the Islanders last season, which was only a game after the Dallas game, I have always been more confident in him than UPL. It's just my opinion. I think his resume in the AHL deserves more benefit of the doubt than UPL's. That's just my take. But if we want to head over to UPL, he looks good against Ottawa. I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. Those last 5 minutes, I'm gonna put it on the Sabres. The Tarasenko goal, he was wide open. The Josh Norris goal, that was wide open. That was on the power play. And the Matthew Joseph goal, he was lost in the slot. So I'm going to give UPL the benefit of the doubt with that. He looked good, especially for a guy who hadn't played in a few weeks. And it goes for Comrie as well. He hadn't played in a few weeks either. So this is where things get interesting. You basically, it's the two guys that you would be less confident in Comrie and UPL. They're playing well, whereas Levi, he's coming off kind of a tough stretch. So who do you go with on Friday against New Jersey and Saturday against Colorado? It's a tough one. It obviously depends on Levi's health. He's day-to-day right now with an injury. I would expect him to be back. I feel like I would go... Because you got to remember, Comrie played for the Devils at one point, so you almost think, do they go for the revenge game? Maybe give Levi some more rest? I think that kind of sounds appealing to me right now. I think that'd be better in my opinion. I don't know. Okay, never mind. He played one game with the Devils. I guess it's not much of a revenge game, but you know what? I would say give it to him. Give Comrie the start. Hopefully Levi's rested, and then you give him Colorado. I feel bad for UPL. I do. But man, blame this 3-man rotation. I don't know. I wish it could work, but it seems like at some point, like something's going to have to be done here, right? Like this 3-goalie rotation, it can't really keep going, can it? I don't really think so. Kyle Poso kind of looks tired these past few games, and you kind of want to sub him out, but you really can't. I mean, you could put in Jost and whatever, but this 3-goalie rotation is kind of limiting who else they can throw into the lineup. So keep an eye out on that. But if it were up to me this weekend, I would go Comrie Friday against the Devils, Levi against the Avs Sunday. I wouldn't be surprised. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they threw Levi in Friday. He can kind of get revenge on the Devils eliminating them from last year. So I would just flip-flop those two. You could have it either way. I mean, New Jersey and Colorado, those are not easy matchups. You're not exactly giving either goalie an easier start. Although I would be terrified to play Jack Hughes right now. He's on pace for like 230 points. Okay, now that that's out of the way, I did ask you guys to bring in some questions. We asked you on some of our socials to submit some topics or questions that you'd like us to discuss. So I'll read off a few of these and give you some of my thoughts. Neither JP or Christian are here to challenge me, so you know you're getting the best opinion. All right. So MP Luke, he asks, is the good start on the PK sustainable for the year, or is it just a lucky start? And he also asked, what did they really change on the PK to start seeing success early in the year? I'll answer the first one. Is it sustainable? I do. Because it's not, like I said, the goalies aren't carrying them through this. The players are forcing other teams to make quick decisions, and oftentimes it's the wrong decision. And their shots, it feels like the goalies are seeing. Although, the only times they've been beaten, I think, it was only 3 times this year, I think. It was the Kreider goal on opening night, which was a miscommunication. And then Montreal had that nice tic-tac-toe goal. At the end of the game, and even then, like, that's a perfect play. And then last night against Ottawa, Samuelson's stick kind of got caught. He couldn't get over to block the pass to Josh Norris, and even that's kind of a perfect play. Like it's tough to beat them right now. I'm trying to think, did Ottawa have their goalie pulled? That might have been part of it too. I don't know. Point is, they're forcing teams to make quick decisions, and their penalty killers have improved. That's a big part of it too. Connor Clifton and Eric Johnson getting the penalty kill. I believe your penalty killers are basically, it's Dahlin, Samuelson, Powers out there, Clifton's out there, Johnson's out there. I don't think Jokiharju gets a ton of PK time, but even then, last year he was one of your main penalty killers. Jokiharju was, and often nights Jacob Bryson or Cal Clegg were as well. And they have their things that they're better at, but obviously their lack of size, it's tough to close off lanes with that and move guys in front of the net. And now you have players that can do that. And on top of that, you have Tage Thompson and Jordan Greenway as pretty much your top unit, who weren't on the unit last year. So that's a big reason for it too. Okay, so JP Hockey asks, 2 weeks into the season, who has impressed you the most so far? For me, it's been Mitz. That is a good question. And honestly, it probably would be Casey Middlestat because, the guy's kind of on a 104-point pace over his last 18 games. Shout out Sabre Metrics for that poll. Honestly, I'm going to go with Tage Thompson, and literally only because it's the improvements in the defensive zone I did not see coming. If this holds, you are legitimately talking about one of the best players in hockey. If he produces like he does last year and he keeps these results up, that is a caliber of player in this league that is it's another level. You're talking about. I don't even want to hype him up too much in case he kind of falls off of this, but it would be insane. So that's my pick for the most impressive player. Honorable mention, Owen Power, sneakily been their best defenseman. He's producing, and the advanced numbers like him too. Okay, so I guess kind of piggybacking off of Tage Thompson, Darlington asks, do you think Tage will reach his 50 goal total? See, this is tough because he's off to this slow start. But even then, he was off to one last year, and he still got so close. I'm going to say no. And I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he finishes this season with a lower point total. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he gets his way back into the mid-90s, maybe 100. I don't know if this defensive improvement does cost him a few points. Is it really the end of the world? I mean, it's a big jump in defense. And he's still producing, the underlying numbers, it still says he's producing well offensively. So I'm going to say no, but I'll say he gets high 40s. He might even get 47, 48 like last year. Alpha Mime asks, should Levi go to Rochester for a bit since our other two guys look solid? So should Levi go to Rochester because Comrie and UPL gave you 3 good games? I'm going to say no. And I understand the line of thinking. I understand if you think Levi looks overmatched and maybe he needs a look down there. I don't think he is overmatched. I think he was just kind of burned out. And I'm not buying the stock on UPL just yet. Now you can say it's classic me hating on UPL. I just need to see more. And at the end of the day, he did let in 4 goals against Ottawa. I'm not, like I said, I've absolved him from blame. I just need to see more of him. That's all that I'm saying. Comrie, he's giving them the best goaltending the team's seen this season. He is their best goalie. Should Levi go to Rochester? No. Like I said, no. Keep him going as your starter. You spent the whole offseason thinking he was going to be. You gotta hope he turns into that. And honestly, And I know Ryan Miller actually went down to Rochester for a few games in 2005, 2006, which is kind of crazy to look back on. I wouldn't do that to Levi. He would have to have a few more tough games for me to even consider that. He's your number one. He just has to be. If he doesn't, then you go from there. I don't know. Okay. Zeke Smith Richardson asks, what is Krebs' best role and what is our view on his upside? So this one's interesting. Krebs has had a really tough start to the season. The advanced numbers aren't pretty. His production isn't pretty. Guy refuses to shoot the puck. But it's 7 games. He's kind of being thrown up and down roles. He's kind of a troll. He's kind of developing into that instigator type. It's tough. What's his best role right now? He's a bottom 6 forward right now. Hopefully he can rebound to those defensive numbers he put up last season. It's been talked about kind of recently because there's been Krebs discourse because he's starting to fall into that territory where, he hasn't taken that step you thought he was going to after you traded Eichel for him. And it's okay that he hasn't because you have Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, Savoy, Kulik, Oslin. You have all these players. You have Middlestat. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if he ended up turning into a lower caliber player than we all thought. But there's still upside in that, and it's been mentioned by a few people that he's almost turning into the new Gergensons. How Gergensons was selected. I think he was 12th overall in 2012. He was selected as this. He was supposed to be a top 6 forward anchor of the future. He scored 15 goals in his rookie season or his sophomore season. He was supposed to be one of the guys of that era, and he wasn't. He turned into a bottom 6 forward, but he also he turned into a damn good one. So if that's what Krebs kind of turns into, if he kind of turns into like a Curtis Lazar type where he can play up and down between the third and fourth lines, I wouldn't mind it. And his upside, I still think his upside it's there. The problem is, we've been saying since the moment he came into the NHL, he has to figure out what he can and can't get away with. And I think he's learned what he can't get away with, but he's still trying to figure out what he can do with his playmaking. It's just not, it hasn't emerged quite yet. And part of that might be because of the depth role he's been placed in most of the time. We'll see. For now, though, I think his best role, keep him in the bottom 6. Hopefully he can alleviate defensive responsibility on whatever line he's put in. Okay. So JP decided to submit something in, and I'm actually going to group it in with another question. And JP said, all that JP said was extend mitts. And on Twitter, the Casey Middlestat fan account asked us what our prediction for a Casey Middlestat contract prediction would be. So it's no mistake, Casey Middlestat has been arguably the Sabres' best player through these first 7 games. Don't recall if he's leading the team in points still or not, but either way, he was at one point, and he looks great doing it. And it's kind of funny how we've gotten to this point. I mean, literally this time last year, we kind of want to rip his head off. And here we are talking about a contract prediction. And I also want to talk about how, like, shout out to, I think Joe Marino was it? Joe Marino tweeted out, extend mitts now before you have to start paying him Cousins and Tage money. And I think it's kind of valid. I don't know if Casey would ever end up making $7 million like those guys, but it is conversation to have. Middlestat isn't a guy I would go 5, 6, 7 years on. To me, he just kind of screams like the type of player you go short term. He's great in different parts of your lineup, super reliable. He brings a skill set that's not easy to find. He's such a good playmaker. He's great on the boards. At the same time, he doesn't play a big role in this team's power play, on the penalty kill. So if I had to predict something, I don't even say it would be a prediction because I have no idea what they would want. But what I would do is I think like 3 years, $6 million I would do. I think in a rising cap world that's fair. I would hesitate anything more than 3 years, and anything more than 6. You know, that does get kind of close to Tage and Cousins. I think 3 times 6 is good. Next, so J.net asks, Olafson, he's causing turnovers. Does this fourth line experiment continue with him? When we were talking about the expected goals per 60, he was number 6th on this team. He's kind of shutting things down defensively. Obviously, he hasn't produced anything offensively, but I'll say ever since he got back into the lineup, he has been skating since his job is on the line. Olafson has looked good these past few games. I would guess after winning Ottawa, they keep him with Girgensons and Okposo for next game. It is like a weird mashing of skill sets, so I wouldn't expect it to continue for very long, but it's working now, and I don't know, hopefully he gets some production there. I was hoping he got one against Ottawa because he really was playing well. And, you know, like J.net says, he is causing turnovers, and like I said, his defensive numbers are pretty good, like better than you would think. Okay, last up, Heath GM asks, what needs to happen to keep the Sabres consistent? Kind of went over this. Balance. They need to find that balance between the offense and the defense. The defense is improved, but this team is nothing without the high-flying scoring that they can do. And the Ottawa game is a perfect example of that. You take that weird 5 minutes out of it, you have a complete, you basically have the effort you're looking for. Not every game is going to be like the Islanders game where they're kind of dominating a team that's tired and on the second half of a back-to-back. The Ottawa game is kind of what you want, that sort of template. All right, so thank you guys for sending those questions and topics in. I think that'll become a pretty normal thing. I think that's a good way to close these episodes, especially you can probably get pretty redundant. Wouldn't be surprised if every episode is talking about, hey, penalty kill good, power play bad, defense good, offense whatever. I don't know. Goaltending, what are they going to do? And you can probably get pretty redundant. So I think these questions are a good way to spice things up. So thank you for sending those in. And that's basically going to do it for this one. I talked a lot longer than I thought I was going to, but I think a big part of that was these questions. So as I said, thank you guys for sending those in. Looking ahead here, obviously the Sabres play the Devils on Friday, Colorado on Sunday. And I think after those 2 games, we'll talk to you again. Christian will be back here. It'll just be me and him. JP still on hiatus, but we'll be back to talk to you guys about those 2 games. Hopefully they've gone well. But that'll be a much more normal episode to that point. But until then, you can follow us on Twitter at the Sabre Report. Also on Instagram at the Sabre Report. You can follow us on TikTok. Subscribe to us on YouTube. If you want updates for the pod, you can follow us at Sabre Report Pod. And other than that, that'll basically do it for this one. We'll see you guys later. Feel free to leave a review. And see you guys later. Take care. Go Sabres.